Vi har altså hatt amerikanske innledere, vi har hatt en dansk, vi nærmer oss, the plot thickens, og nå kommer Dag Furuholmen, som forfatter, han psykiater, han medlem av Mannsforum, han mannsprisvinner, og det var sånn vi lurte han inn i firmaet, og han da også har drevet kurs for menn i mange år. Så han vet alt om dette, og nå skal han snakke om menns utfordringer og innbakt erfaringer eller resultater fra en undersøkelse som vi har hatt blant våre medlemmer. Så da, mens han finner manuset sitt, så ber vi folk om å sette seg og roe seg, slik at vi kan komme i gang. Han også forfatter av den boken som ligger her ute, som heter altså Mannen, myter, løgn og sannhet. Og vær så god, Dag. Jeg ser frem til at... Åja, litt hjelp her. Kenneth her? Ja, men så kan jeg da fortelle, for de som ikke har sett på programmet i det siste, at etter Dag så drar vi tilbake til Danmark, og så får vi en dansk politiker som har noe av fasiten på disse spørsmålene vi stiller her. Og så har vi et panel. Og i panelet så vil det sitte en innleder som enda ikke har snakket. Han skal snakke etter panelet, men det da... Åja, sorry. Do I have to take all this in English again? No. The next speaker is Dag Furuholmen. And I told you all about him, and soon he will find his presentation. And as I said, after him, we're going back to Denmark, to Jesper, the politician, and then will be possibilities for questioning. So you can see there are more chairs up here now, and there'll be a large panel, and we got 1 hour for questioning and discussion with the panel. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Yeah, great. The floor is yours.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about Norwegian conditions. So I have to use a manuscript because I'm not that fluent in English. But after 40 years of working with men in the therapy room and in men's groups for about 15 years, it became clear to me that the political discourse of today is based on a number of negative myths about men. And since the 1970s, it's been popular to produce polarized images of men and women, where men are assigned the bad qualities and women are assigned the good ones. Women are in addition seen as being heroic victims. And thus it has been politically legitimate to idealize women and devalue men. The radical part of the women's movement came up with a general definition of men as patriarchs, based on a Marxist analysis of the gender. The reality was that very few men could fill this designation. Most men were workers, clerks, and just as far from being patriarchs as the women they lived with. Nevertheless, in the 70s, this led to a politicization of home life and a lot of matrimonial crises. I was there as a psychiatrist and I saw all this happening. And the slogan was that women should realize themselves, actually at all costs. Men were also receiving almost racist labels, stating that all men had it in them to be violent aggressors or sexual abusers. In Norway, actually, a lot of fathers were imprisoned as pedophiles because of false medical evidence produced at Aker sykehus in Oslo. In the 90s, there was a change. Young women were tired of being given the victim role, and men were instead defined as role-confused, unconscious, primitive, immature, socially unintelligent, beer-drinking football fans. I guess some of you recognize this. Women were described as caring, loving, emotionally intelligent, mature, good leaders, and became the new heroes. It's actually interesting to see how in the film industry, which is pretty politically correct, a lot of new films have women heroes in it. And then we have the book titles like The End of Men, The Rise of Women, or Where Have All the Good Men Gone? So the polarization of the sexes in our collective conscious, with men as the bad, morally inferior gender, is adversely affecting boys. I think this is something people are not very aware of. They grow up, it's affecting their self-esteem. I mean, they grow up being too much, being too aggressive, potentially violent, sexually exploitive, engaging in mansplaining, and are in addition described as being undeservedly privileged. And remarkably few are actually interested in investigating these myths about men. Recently, so-called social scientists have come up with the ultimate myth of men, toxic masculinity. For some, it obviously feels like a good explanation of the discomfort in the culture, and then our society tends to swallow it raw. The precursor of this concept is derived from a postmodernist sociologist and trans person, Revin Connell. His or her main concept was derived from Marxist theory and gay liberation slogans. He described a normative form of masculinity, which is essentially like white middle-class heterosexual men with traits of aggression, violence, toughness, competition, and success that dominate the hierarchy, with gays, transgender, black people, and women beneath them. I think this is hardly an objective description of most men's lives. The term toxic masculinity is a further development of this, and was defined by Dr. Kerry Kupers, a feminist who developed his thesis from observing violent interaction between high-crime, psychiatrically disturbed prison inmates in high-security US prisons. So, the male as a potential criminal sociopath has thus become the new mold all ordinary, healthy American and European men are to be measured against, to see if they have a bit of the disease. The view of men as privileged patriarchs and women as oppressed gender has historically given rise to both political and legal measures. The Norwegian gender equality legislation is a result of this and has been mainly unchanged since 1978. In section 1 on the purpose paragraph is said, it aims in particular to improve the position of women, and recently added, and also minorities. In other words, the Norwegian gender equality law contains gender discrimination against men. The law also contradicts itself by stating, the purpose of the act is to promote equality and prevent discrimination on grounds of sex. Even in the stronghold of feminism in Sweden, the Gender Equality Act is made gender neutral. If we look at our political parties, most of them operate with official women's networks and a women's political spokeswoman. This way, the women are giving a type of double vote. One can only dream of the idea of male political spokesmen and networks for men in our political parties. I think in the long run this creates a democratic problem. And let's see who is actually giving our politicians advice on gender issues. Among others, they strongly rely on our gender research institutes. In Norway, 90% of all gender researchers and also their board members are women. This is against the law, but they don't care. This also actually worries our National Research Ethics Committee. And they write on their websites, I cite, traditionally, the focus has been on gender of traditionally the focus has not been on the gender of researchers. They were expected to be objective in their approach. Today we know that this is not possible. Gender colors how we see and recognize society. The Research Council has come to see this as a democratic problem, which also has major detrimental effects on the quality and diversity of our research. Did you hear that? Nothing has been done about it. It's really a serious statement. And so while we know about almost everything about girls' and women's lives, we know a lot less about how boys and men feel, how masculinity is experienced in today's gender society, and why the male part of the population tops a majority of negative statistics. It's also interesting how this kind of research is reflected in the tools for measuring equality. The internationally used Global Gender Gap Index measured gender inequality only by the issue, are women lagging behind? If men's quality of life and problems are worse than women's, it's not registered. The scale relies heavily on issues that are addressed in women's rights movements. It is, in other words, biased to one gender only. This is used in the United Nations and everywhere. So if you look at how men are lagging behind, they in general, as Warren mentioned, they have a general shorter life expectancy, and we also heard it from Groruddalen that it's like 11, 12 years difference between males there and women on the West. They have 3 to 4 times more suicide, as you can see from this curve. And obviously the blue ones are the males, the red ones are the women, and you can see this is all through the different ages. Suicide is the main cause of death for young males. And it's also a very high risk for lonely old men. Yeah, they also have 3 times more drug problems, alcohol problems. 95% of all Norwegian inmates in prisons are men. They also suffer from more invisible psychiatric illness like depression. They have less contact with their own children. 25% of men over 40 have no kids at all. I can't remember the exact number for women, but I can't remember, it's 8 or 11%. Unfortunately, we have had several suicides among our members also in Mannsforum. I personally tried to obtain information from researchers on how fathers who are losing contact with their children are doing. I contacted a number of gender research institutes and our universities, including the Institute for Suicide Research in Oslo. Nobody has done any investigation on this subject. This is actually striking. Knowing the interest in finding causes of suicide and possible strategies for prevention, nobody asked this simple question. But let's look at some of the explanatory models for boys and men's troubles. I mean, we've heard a lot from Warren also. And I think I'm probably going to repeat some of the facts, but I'll start with the American doctor Luann Brissendine, who's written the book The Male Brain. She says, men know what society and women expect from them. They must be strong, courageous, and independent. They grow up with a pressure to suppress their pain and fear, hide their soft sides, and stand firm when challenged. And just mark that this is totally an opposition of what feminists say they expect from men, officially. The book Saving Our Sons by Michael Gurian opens with a poem by an Eskimo poet. He says, "There is a tribe of invisible boys moving around us like shadows. Have you felt them? They cannot be seen except when they die. Only then do they become visible." I actually think we have a lot of invisible boys walking around also in Norway. The Norwegian researcher Mette, Lyberg, Rasmussen and colleagues have tried to explore how suicide can be linked to the understanding of masculinity. And she's been researching a number of suicides of young males with no prior depression, psychiatric disorder, drug use, or anything. This came just out of the blue. And she says, suicides emerged as a way to compensate for their lack of masculinity, and there were three main rules. Rule number 1, all hope is gone, no one has to know. This was about losing hope of performing in relation to one's own ambitions, combined with a lack of willingness to reveal the shortcomings and having to be ashamed. Rule number 2, weakness was never allowed. Relatives also told of unmanageable problems in the young man's relationship with their critical and flawless fathers. And the boys were also very dependent on feedback from the fathers and his acceptance. Rule number 3, presentation of the self as heroic. The survivors could see how they staged the suicides to create an image of themselves as heroic. The way they ended their life left a signature with a very strong emotional power, often directed to the father, sometimes to a lost girlfriend. And the suicide was a final heroic effort to repair their self-image. If I can do something as hard as that, I must be someone. Or I was someone. Dr. Warren Farrell says in his book, The Boy Crisis, that father deprivation, as we heard, is the main cause of the boy crisis. And he's in line with all modern researchers of kids that lose contact with their fathers. They are less likely to show empathy, less assertive, more often depressed. They suffer from sleep disorders. They are undisciplined and in opposition. They often have low self-esteem and fewer friends. They will do poorly in schools. They are raised by mothers in homes without male role models and then begin in feminized schools. The lack of positive male role models makes them vulnerable to strong destructive alpha males, such as gang leaders and drug addicts. And 80% of the school shooters, as we heard, lack contact with their fathers. Even if you know all these things, no change in the family law in Norway. So also here in Norway, there are an incredible number of boys without male role models. Many grow up with single mothers. 90% of the workers in kindergarten are women. 80% in primary school are women. School psychology services, health nurses, and psychologists in general are mainly female. 25% of all children live with only one parent. And of these 25%, 84% lives with mother, 16% with father. About 13,000 children are victims of mother's systematic sabotage of being with their fathers. And if you look at like last month, approximately 50,000 kids did not see their fathers last month. There are no negative consequences for mothers sabotaging contact, as the authorities do not punish mothers for this. They'll actually get awarded economically. They get increased alimonies when they block the father from seeing their kids. The slogan goes, what is best for the mother is best for the child. This has to do definitely with social services like the child welfare systems. And Anita Skårstad Storhaug has written a doctoral thesis on how the child welfare understand father's roles. Shortly, she states, fathers experience not being heard in relation to what is best for the child. They are met with attitudes that mothers are the most important caregivers. If fathers express concern about mothers' caring abilities, their concern are not taken seriously. A dominant understanding is that the mother-child relationship is more essential and natural than the father-child relationship. There is little awareness of the negative consequences of omitting fathers. The official ideology, though, says that it's important to involve fathers, but not the practice. If mother portray father in a bad light, the caseworkers will mostly take her word for truth and choose not to contact father. And they have many arguments for dismissing the father so that mother has greater chance of retaining the care for the child. Like they tell the father to move out and not to make any fuss or trouble. And when he's first moved out, they say, well, but the kid has been in mother's care for so long now that you can't just move in again. So I think this is in line with our cultural understanding of men as easily replaceable. Fathers' sorrow and pain about losing contact with their children is a taboo in the debate. I guess you've all seen that. He is then defined as egotistic or as a whiner that should think more about his kids and not about himself. So it's a very sort of moralistic devaluing of men's pain. This leads to the question, do we as a society have empathy with men's feelings? Again, Warren has talked about it. And he made a very interesting analysis of this in his book, The Myth of Male Power. And he coined the term the empathy gap. And like I said, we've always needed to use young men as warriors, hunters, protectors, and by telling them they are going to be heroes. And since they need to sacrifice themselves, we have to desensitize ourselves of the risk and the pain we're exposing them to. I'll give you a couple of examples. In England in the 1940s, during the wartime, if a guy didn't go to war, everybody didn't want to talk to him, especially not the women. He was just looked upon as a coward. A few years ago, Boko Haram sparked a heated debate when they kidnapped 300 young girls. I guess you all remember that. How many of you guys know that around 1,000 young men were beheaded and burned alive in the same tribal areas? Not many. Interesting, isn't it? And also this promise of the hero status is mostly, I think, not fulfilled. In the US, for instance, more Vietnam veterans died of suicide than were killed in the war because of the way they were received when they came home. I must actually praise our Child, Youth and Family Directorate for once. They initiated a research on how men are experiencing living with violent partners. It's called The Male Pain, Men's Experiences of Violence in Close Relationships. And she states that, or they, it's three researchers who've done this. Men visiting crisis shelters have been exposed to several forms of partner violence. Most have been subjected to serious and systematic violence during several years. Several have experiencing threats of being deprived of their care for the children, and the fear of destroying the family has contributed to their failure to report the violence. I heard they were talking about this, and a lot of the fathers, they didn't dare to leave the family because they were sure that the mother would then destroy the kids. And then they couldn't confront the issue. They have felt that they do not fit in with a helpless perception of the perpetrator and the victim. And they have been afraid not to be believed. And the researchers found a particular form of violence to which men are exposed that they characterized as the reversal of violence. This is very important. It's a major and significant problem for men that their female partners can turn a reality around by telling the outside world that it's they who suffer from violence, not the male. In Norway, we also have a systematic, I see that Guttorm is waving. I'm not going to stop quite yet, Guttorm. Yeah. In Norway, we also have a systematic legislative problem. Paragraph 36 of the family law, which says that actually, in effect, if there is a court case, the mother will get custody for the child. And this has led to an unprecedented number of court cases. This is what happened in Sweden. And as you can see, when the same law came in Sweden, it resulted in a 237% increase in court cases from 2005 to 2017. In education, 34% of all graduates at 2017 University of Oslo were men, and 66% were women. 3 out of 4 newly graduated doctors, psychologists, dentists, and lawyers in Norway were women. 70% of those who do not thrive in first school years are boys. In high school, boys do best only in gymnastics, while 1/3 falls out. Research says that there are lower expectations for boys, and those who drop out of school are disadvantaged in the labor market and overrepresented as social assistance recipients. We have, I have to jump a little bit here, Guttorm, but unfortunately the Stoltenberg Committee, who has been looking upon different biological realities in boys and girls, they do not talk about boys' need to have male role models. And I think from what we heard from Warren Farrell, this is definitely a significant thing. So we need to get more male teachers, especially now when so many kids are living only with their mothers. So I'll go straight now to, because I made a little survey in our members, so I'll just file very fast through those. It was 91 persons who answered this survey. Yeah, first 10 questions in the pilot are about finding out who are our members and how do they live, and they were quite normal guys. 68% were divorced or single. They had normal salaries, 400,000 to 600,000. 21% live with their children. 14% have shared custody. 45% have regular contact, and 32% experiences systematic sabotage of contact, and 20% of them have no contact whatsoever with their kids. Then comes, I don't know how you say that in English, rosinen i pølsa. That means the... Okay, so these figures doesn't really show it in a good way, because these as you can see here, it says 0 to 20. Actually, the scale goes from 0 to 100. The way the average score of this question is 23 out of 100, which is very poor. This is how the fathers have been experienced child welfare. Counseling, family counseling services, a little bit better, 25 out of 100, which is also pretty bad. It's because of the feminization of those services. But the worst thing is here, your personal experience with the court system. And you see they score 20 out of 100, which is defined as very bad. And I must say that I think that is really that is a problem in our society that has great consequences, also for the way our male population is supporting and trusting our courts. Unsubstantiated charges, as you can see here, 62% have experienced false allegations of threats of violence against partners. 19% have experienced false allegations of violence against children. 5% have experienced false allegations of sexual abuse against partners, and 14% have experienced false allegations of sexual abuse against their own children. So I think if we look at all these facts that I've been presenting to you, to say that men are the sort of the gender that has the most that are sort of the patriarchs in the system and that have all the good stuff coming to them, it doesn't seem like that to me. And I must say that nowadays it seems like the socialization into the adult male role has both become under-prioritized and has been giving a negative social value in our modern analysis of the world. And this is extremely bad for our boys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dag. Here came some tough statistics for us. And Dag is, beside all the things I said before he started, he's also the boss of the research team of Mannsdagen. So we hope you carry on this research and get more numbers on the table. That will underpin it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. We are going back to Denmark. And all the speakers so far have asked, where are the politicians? Where are the spokesmen for men, boys, and fathers? And I can now tell you there is one. There is one in Scandinavia, apart from Jan, who started, which is not very supported by his party. We've got Simonsen, from Copenhagen, politician in Copenhagen, and a social democrat, I may say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are looking forward to hear how you're going to revolutionize the party and the parliament Danish to make more people stand up and be spokesmen for men, boys, and fathers. Vær så god.
Thank you. Thank you. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Those who didn't vote the last election, sit down. Those who didn't vote the last election, sit down. Okay. National or local? Okay. Those who voted for a candidate where it was male politics or family politics or gender politics that was decisive, stay standing up. The others sit down. Yeah. The rest of you sit down. We saw it all. Few persons think when they make and when they put their sign or the little leaflet into the ballot, they think that gender politics or male politics or family politics is the most decisive item. Most people vote on grounds of immigration or economics or healthcare or wider issues. Climate as well, of course. We'll get back to climate actually because there's been some changes we can learn of in the men's movement. But why? Why is it that a subject we have heard all day can lead to terror, can lead to deprivation in all societies, which has consequences for a lot of areas? Why is it not politically important? This is the single question we need to ask ourselves. Lots of us have been working in this area for 20 or 30 years. Nothing has happened. I know I'm a little bit categorical here, but more or less, nothing has happened. Why? Are we stupid? Are we incompetent? Why? My wife once said to me, "You're like these guys, we went in the old days when there were like tribal societies. We went out catching the animals, and then we dragged them all the way back to the camp. When we get back to the camp, they made all arrangements to take the deers out of our hands." She said, "You are so heroic in the things that you do, but when it gets down to like custody with kids, or when it gets down to health, men's health, when it gets into some of the many areas we talk about, you lose. We don't have a big program, we don't have a big funding of prostate cancer. They have it with breast cancer. We don't have won a lot of custody battles in general. We actually have legislation in many countries going the other way around. Symbolically, we win some, I agree, we change law, but the administration of laws in many Western countries go the wrong way. We are stupid. Somebody mentioned Trump before. He's not. And I'm a social democrat, but I say to you, he's not. He is political intelligent when he takes a subject like this, inviting, or his staff around him, then he's intelligent in picking a staff that sees this area. The left, what is left of the left? The left was usually parties who saw themselves as changing society for a better good. Now, in some areas, they are not, and I regret that, and we have our part in that. I try to change that. But the way that we think politics, the way we do things like that, we think in argumentations. We think in sincereness. We think in fair game. We think in all our opponents will follow some fair rules. But we just saw a graph here when organizations, our opponents, more or less illegally, have gained funds for our public tax money. If we think politics like that, we are going to lose and lose and lose and lose the male agenda. And we should not win the male agenda because, we are tough males, we are good males. We should win the male agenda because it's a much more nicer society. It's more sexy, it's more fun, and it's good. I'm a heterosexual man, I have a wife and 4 kids, but I fucking love men. They're so funny. And a lot of people talked about this house here, built by men. All the houses in the world will be built by men. Today and tomorrow. It will not change. My father was a bricklayer, and you will not see a lot of women going to be bricklayers. We have to, be a little bit more conservative on our looks on gender. Some things will change, but we are also biological human beings. And in a large extent, some of the things that we do, we have to take that into account. It doesn't mean that we as men, as lots of us other speakers have told about, of course can transform ourselves. We can and we shall do that and be more lovable and compassion. Of course we should that. But we should also have the ability to see that men are doing that. All the developed countries, men earn the foremost of the money. And they give them generously to share with their families and society. They earn them in the private sector, and we use them in the public sector, where the women work, and where the majority of those who gets the things from the public sector are women. We are not cheap, We share, men share. This is the great story of men, and we will continue to do so. Yes. Now I forgot what to say. Men were the first on Mount Everest. Men walked the moon. It's only still men who walk the moon. Men still build the biggest companies in the world. Facebook, Google, stuff like that. Men will in all future still build the biggest companies in the world. No matter how much seed money you put into female agencies, things will stay the same because it's inherent in some of our nature. We can cultural and historical change a little bit, but we will see the same patterns. What we can do is try to reduce male risk behavior, but there will be tendencies and inherited biological ways of doing that. Democracy made by men, physics made by men, philosophy made by men. Do we share? Of course men share. There are lots of stuff we are idiots at. Lots of stuff. Men included female women into the democracy. Thank you, men. Men included women into lots of institutions with no problem, because of course women should be a part of that. Of course. Men are sharing. Men are sharing. The bad news, as we heard all day, is there is a war on men and boys, but there's also a war on women and girls. There is a gender war, a battle of the sexes. And it's not good for either of us. The bad or the good news for us men is that we will win this war if it escalates. We will. We are the stronger sex. Right now it doesn't seem like that, but we are the stronger sex. But there's 2 options, or there are 2 possibilities of this victory to come into reality. One of them is that boys and men will fight back in a positive, offensive way, and the result will be Western societies in balance, more or less balance between men and women. But there's also a second option. Boys and men will fight back in a destructive way, and the result will be further gender war and a gender structure that will go back to the 1950s. And you can just look around if you don't believe me. You don't have to be a politician to see elections everywhere where that happens. So now we are in a situation where we have a big, large middle section of parties and voters who are more or less like this about gender, about custody. Not the ones who have like, we say, have like the arm in the, yeah, I don't know the phrase in English, but when you're catched in some kind of trouble, you understand it. But the large majority of men, they actually, when you tell them stories like that, they won't believe it's like that. They won't believe it. It's like it's hard even to communicate. They say, no, I'm living in an enlightened state in the Western world. Are they really treating a person like that? It seems twice as haram. So it's hard to even explain that. In some ways, we live in the 1930s. Yeah, we do. You know, the 1930s was the way up to the 1940s or 39 when we started the Second World War. We have an extremist left wing that fights an identity war in the media, in some of our institutions. But we also have a little right wing who's gaining power as well, who will take all the way back to the destruction we knew before in history. And again, I say, the large majority, they don't give a shit about this area. This is our biggest problem. This is our biggest problem. We need to help our boys and men to understand that biology matters. Of course, culture and society also does, but there is differences. We need to help our boys and men by stressing the importance of discipline and love in a good balance. We need to help our boys and men by making them proud of their culture. Western Christian tradition and culture has many important contributions to male life. We need to help the boys and men by transforming the political paradigm in the Western world to take boys and men's issues into account. And we need to help boys and men to transform family and gender politics into a balance between men, women, boys, and girls. It's not 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It's not a everyday thing to be a politician. For a lot of people, it's something that happens every second year or fourth year when they have to vote. And people who join political parties are few. The member, now you just saw Men's Forum before, they had members. Lots of political parties, the member statistics are going like this, down, 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 down. When it does that, you play the power into hand of extremists and small groups. How many in here are part of any party? Raise up your hand. Good, good. The rest of you should join any party. Because if we have to raise the male agenda in parties, there has to be someone in them who says it. And they are more or less without people, the parties. For me, as a as a socialist, as a social democrat, I can look on Trump or other right-wingers transforming politics. For me, it's a good thing. Sometimes political solutions, they come from different areas. For me, I hope when Trump or others do that, we can say that we also need to have a politics on that, because now they have this commodity on their shelf, saying like the agenda of the climate. In my country, it was a more or less sectarian vegan movement at the start. But now, any politician in my countries, they bit more or less over the old agenda. So I don't care if it comes from vegans or if it comes from Trump. If it's true, that matters. Okay, the last thing I would like to stress is, I have to say, I'm an academic. before turning into politics, I was an academic. 20 years ago, I made a book about men, health, and disease. And I did a PhD, the first Scandinavian PhD in Scandinavia about this area. And good for that. But it has nothing to do with politics. This is rational. This has method. This you can discuss. When Trump called one of his opponents for lying Ted, and some of us actually laugh when he bullies an opponent. This shows what politics is. It's with the heart and the gut. It's not with the brain. So if we want to do politics, we have to join parties, we have to get the right people elected as candidate, and we have to get them elected. That has nothing to do with argumentation or dialogue. That is raw power. And this is the way to do the things. This is what our opponents does. And good for them. It's a competition, and we're the bad part of that competition. Yes, last year there was an election in Denmark, and I wrote this book, which is more or less a lot of economy, but also a chapter on gender politics, which was new in Denmark, and which was a surprise also for many of my colleagues. And I actually also achieved in a period of 1 week or 1.5 weeks in the long election, that the topic of discussion was what I concern as high politics, namely gender politics, family politics. That was on the agenda. And we're not lots of men, but more or less we could get our way of thinking into the mainstream media all over. Of course, it was quite competitive, but this is how it is. Yes, I think I will end with that. I don't have like a. Normally, I don't. I see some of my colleagues have like a big, and big ending.
Well, you've had one.
No, I need one.
Well, yeah.
Couldn't you stand up? This is how you make politics. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. Very good. And you did leave a message to us to tell us what to do. Get into a party and start working for gender equality. Very good. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to have the speakers come up to the panel so that we can receive and take questions from the floor. Jan, where is Jan? Has he gone? He left? All right. Huh? Okay. When he comes, you send him in. Oh, here he comes.
Oh, man, I should have taken
Take your place in the panel.
Is there somebody else?
Yeah.
Is there anybody
Yeah,
else?
and you?
'Cause-
Sorry. You
Do it.
what?
well, I would trade.
Jan,
with-
you're in the panel, yeah.
No, it's
Ja, du
as long
sitter her.
as I'm not sitting on a hard
Okay,
chair.
now we got the panel in place.
Only if I can stretch out.
Sit there.
All right, but can I put my legs up?
Jan?
Oh, yeah.
Jan?
Now we're ready.
God, that's better.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I would love one.
Now we want questions or points of view from the floor. Who's first? Hands up. Hands up. Yeah, great. We'll take 3 questions before we leave the word to the floor. No, to the panel.
Hi there. Thank you so much for all your contributions to this conference. I was actually would want to direct one question for Warren Farrell. So you focused on the way I experienced you focused on the social constructs around the man. But I, as a female, respectively, I'm wondering on whether there is a distinctively male part of the human condition that I cannot access, and whether would you comment on that? Is it all social, and what degree of that is from the inner self of the man that I can't? I need to hear it from you guys. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You remember the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Next up.
Well, wait, am I supposed to answer it
Next
or
up.
just remember it?
Remember. Remember. I'll remind you.
He's old. He's not going to be able to remember it through a couple more questions. You better answer right away.
That's a very shy floor here. Yeah, we'll start with it. You think about another question, okay?
Oh,
No,
yeah, wait
no,
for
I was
Mike.
just joking.
Yeah.
This is
No,
Just answer.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Here's one.
Okay.
Come in.
Dag Brodin. Mr. I remember you referred to mass shootings and computer gaming, and we have a world famous mass shooter in Norway. No need to mention who is this, but it was a discussion after this regarding computer games, and it was a colleague of Mr. Yeah, to the right there, Minister of Culture, Anniken Huitfeldt. She made a statement to the paper after that, because there was this mass shooter. He had locked himself for a year with the computer gaming to sort of prepare himself. And I remember this Minister of Culture, she made a statement that she said, quote, "We belong to a generation that knows that computer gaming is not dangerous." And just footnote there.
absolutely.
Take another question. Who were first? Was that you? Okay.
Yes, thank you. This is mostly for Warren and Karen, because you've been obviously victims of attempts to censor you or to stop you. I don't know how many times the Wikipedia page for Karen Straughan has been deleted due to campaigns and so. And I think many people have experienced, if not in such a grand scale, some sort of censorship or attempt to silence their voices. I know I have, and I think many people have. What advice do you have for reaching out to people and for having a voice despite of censorship on social media platforms and being pressured away from lectures or debates and so on?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. I think, Warren, you better start. Okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Before I forget, as Karen would say.
I think it was the socially, is it?
Yeah, I remember the
Yeah,
question.
okay.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to get it straight in my own head
Thank you,
because
thank
I've
you
already
very
forgotten it.
So let me start quickly with the computer games, and I'll go backwards here, and not just to show I can remember the first part. The computer games and violence in the media and that type of thing, lack of female teachers, those were all part of my original proposal to my publisher as to one of the 10 causes for the boy crisis. But the more I studied, the more I saw that the computer games weren't a problem that much in any significant way, any suicidal way, any real depression way, and so on, if the boy had good contact with his father, had a healthy relationship where there were boundaries that were enforced, where there was tough love, where there was discipline, and love. And so where there was that checks and balance parenting that I talked about, where there was a good communication and tension between the mothers and the fathers, then involvement in anything very rarely became addictive. And so it's when it's addictive that it becomes part of the problem, but then we blame the computer games as opposed to asking the question, what is it that led to that addiction? What is that led to that vulnerability that led the computer games to being the only thing in the boy's life that he could feel that he identified with? And so I've found over and over again that, for example, you heard me talk about the importance of male teachers as a role model. Well, male teachers aren't that big an issue if the boy has a good male role model at home, a good male father at home. It's only when he doesn't that the combination of the dad deprivation at home and the male role model at the school, that's what together creates the problem. And so that's been the most challenging. Let's see, that was the computer games. The question before that,
That was the sabotaging.
Yes, the censorship. And Karen, I'm sure you've had, yes. For example, on the censorship issue, the first, when I was on the board of NOW, I was asked by the New York Times to write an op-ed piece. I wrote an op-ed piece that was too long. So what they did with it is they turned it into 2 op-ed pieces, and they gave it brilliant coverage and wonderful cartoons by one of the most famous cartoonists in the world. And then they asked me to do more op-eds, and I did more op-eds. And then when I started incorporating an empathy for men and boys into my op-eds, the next 28 op-eds were not published. It was not until I ran for governor of California, I was interviewed by Michael Lewis, who is, some of you may know, is the author of Moneyball and books like that. He had a very good contact at the New York Times, and it was only from his personal referral of me that I broke the 28 cycle problem. When I was doing, in this book alone, as The Boy Crisis came out, I hired sequentially 3 of the best mainstream publicists in the country that have been very helpful to me on the myth of male power and why men are the way they are, and my first books. And so thinking this would be really good, my wife and I put out a significant amount of money for that. They got almost nothing. So I hired one conservative publicist, and they got 90% of what I was on. I was on Fox News over and over again, and got a lot of very positive feedback, and a good percentage of the books, the Boy Crisis books, have sold as a result of that. I was on a show, a national TV show at 8 times, and I was one of their favorite guests. And then I was on with Gloria Steinem, and I said as we were talking about, Gloria mentioned how men were paid $1 for each 80 cents that women were paid. And I said, actually, Gloria, that's not accurate, because here's what it is really about, the pay gap. It's not about men versus women. It's actually about dads versus moms. Never married women who have never had children actually have out-earned never married men who have never had children since the 1970s. And I began to elaborate on that. And Gloria Steinem went like this to the director. And the producer of the show, she went like this, and the conversation stopped. We went to commercial. The program was never aired, and I was never invited back. I sent notes to Gloria. She never responded to me. So I sent her a toy telephone because I thought maybe her telephone was broken. She never responded to that. And Gloria, by the way, is a wonderful human being. She just truly believes that men who don't agree with her are the enemy. She speaks of them that way. She's actually quite radical and but she's a very fine human being. But when you disagree with her, that's the end of you. And so that's just 3 of about 100 examples of what that process was about. Karen's comment, and then I'll respond to the.
For me, it's like the Wikipedia thing. That's like a repeated thing. I think probably it was back in 2012 or 2013. Somebody made a Wikipedia page for me. There'd been already a couple of news reports about me in newspapers and on TV, so. Apparently I'm newsworthy, and that's what you need to be in order to get into Wikipedia. So somebody wrote a Wikipedia page, and he sent it to me, and by the time I clicked on the link and went and had a look, it was deleted. And apparently there have been other attempts over the last 8 years or so to actually get a Wikipedia page for me. You would think that somebody who's spoken at a number of universities, somebody who's spoken at a number of political party conventions, at major events, national events and international events, that I would be considered newsworthy enough. I've had hit pieces written about me in Vice News and BuzzFeed and The New Republic, and you know, a whole number of really negative press stories written about me. I'm on Netflix. You can check that out. Having a conversation with across a table with a feminist who looks like she's being forced to eat bird droppings the whole time. But I mean, you would think that I am worthy of a Wikipedia page. Apparently not. This has been an ongoing thing for years. Somebody comes up with a Wikipedia page, and then it just gets deleted, and it's always because she's not newsworthy. That's usually the excuse.
Arne, you have something?
Yes, because that has actually happened to Mannsforum as well. We have tried to get an article in Wikipedia about us.
Yeah.
And it was debated among the moderators, and it was deleted. So that was not long ago. So we experience the same.
The same thing. And one of the most problematic things about Wikipedia is, I mean, there have been feminist events sponsored by universities to get feminism into Wikipedia. So they're actively, in some universities, recruiting women's studies undergraduates and graduate students to become Wikipedia editors and sort of infuse Wikipedia with the feminist perspective, right? But at the same time, there's already a feminist perspective, just because most Wikipedia editors are men, and you have to volunteer for that. This is just like 97% of volunteer firefighters are men. Well, you know, 85% of Wikipedia editors are men. It's something that they feel compelled to do. They don't get paid for it, but they do it. And so you already have a strong leaning towards this, towards the feminist narrative on Wikipedia, and then on top of that, you have a concerted attempt, organized attempt, campaigns to get even more feminism into Wikipedia. So I don't know, maybe in another 10 years I'll get my Wikipedia page.
Thank you, Karen. We have to go on with the questions from the floor.
All right.
You already got 4 here. We take the 3 first.
Wait.
There was one more.
There
There
was
was
one
more.
more
The-
question that
The
needs to be answered.
first question that got asked,
Yeah.
and if
Socialization
I do not
biology.
answer that question, Karen's going to get on me for forgetting it.
Yeah. I'll totally make fun of you.
Okay, yeah, fine.
The brief answer, well, maybe not a brief answer, who knows? It is very, there are the great majority of experiences that men and women have. You can do a parallel that allows the person to be, to feel some of the pain. So for women, that parallel would be the pressure on women to be beautiful, and to, and if they're not beautiful, the way they're ignored. What is very difficult to do is to get in, to understand the depth to which men are programmed to protect women. And so there's 2 groups of people who are programmed to protect women: men and women. And so everyone is programmed to protect women. And to understand the biology of that, and therefore how tough it is to access, in almost all species, including insects, the females will procreate with the male that is the equivalent of the alpha male. And so, for example, among buck elks, the females look at, and by the way, this is about 85% of the time, the alpha male is the one that the woman chooses to procreate with. So the buck elk wants to have connection with the male that has the largest antlers. That's the largest rack. And so the male that has the largest rack is the one that is perceived to be the best protector. And so she then wants to procreate with him. And when he gets rid of that rack, after the procreation and he succeeds in the sexual experience, he is then, the next step is that he has to get rid of that rack immediately, because in order to create that rack, he consumes 33% of the calcium, minerals, and nutrients that he needs to survive. So if he doesn't get rid of that rack immediately by rubbing it against a tree, he's likely to die before the winter season comes, and he can replenish those nutrients. Now that's a perfect example of what the problem of masculinity is. You heard me say during my presentation that men's weakness is our facade of strength. Here's this buck elk that has the strongest rack, but he's actually the weakest elk, but he's appealing to the woman because his facade of strength is so effective, because he can fight off another predator with his big rack. It doesn't make any difference how weak he is underneath, as long as he's able to protect her. That is the part of masculinity that no man articulates, because if you articulated it, you'd start questioning it. And that's what this movement is about. This movement must begin to articulate our vulnerability, our weakness being our facade of strength. And this is the transition that we have an opportunity to make in the next generation. This is what is hard for women to access, in the same way that it's hard for men to access what it's like to go through a pregnancy, what it's like for the hormones to change, and for you as a mom to become more protective and focused on the child than you ever have been, and what it is like for you as a woman to grow up with such emphasis on beauty, which is such a facade, which is such a cheap facade for what you really are as a human being.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to have a comment on that.
Yeah, afterwards.
No, Guttorm, it's on that same question. Because I think that some of the confusion about the gender differences in Norway is quite large. And it's mainly because the gender researchers and the gender research and gender theory says that we are blank slates. You know, we come out and we are alike, and then we are impregnated with culture, and culture is what makes us male or female, which obviously is a great scam. You know, I mean, it's extremely arrogant. It's extremely arrogant to say that we, as the only species on Earth, are totally unimpressed by our gender. So, as a psychiatrist, I've seen that male emotions and female emotions, male needs and female needs, male ways of thinking and female ways of thinking, and making problems and having personality disorders and all these kind of things are pretty much alike. So we are very much alike, also in our problems. But the thing is that you mentioned hormones. We do have hormones. Everybody in Norway knows about what happens with women when they are in their menstrual period, or in their when they want to create kids and all these kind of things. Nobody almost knows anything about what happens to a male with testosterone. A lot is happening with males with testosterone. Even in the third trimester inside the belly of the mother, this is what creates, puts in the driving force in making us into males. After the birth, is the first thing that happens to a baby boy is that he gets a new blush of testosterone that changes him a lot, and it seems like this is, nobody wants to know about it. The only thing people know about testosterone is that it makes people angry and it makes them into killers, which is obviously bullshit.
It is. You know, that's one of the things too, because it's a correlation does not equal causation thing. So because men who were violent and killed somebody, well, after they did that, their testosterone levels were high. Well, then it was like, oh, testosterone made them, they're a high testosterone male, and so testosterone causes this. No, it's actually, testosterone is largely a reward hormone. So if you have a couple of hunter-gatherers, men who go out and they spend the day hunting, they have to go far from home, and you test their saliva through that whole process. Over time, they're not very high in testosterone when they're out there about to, try and spear a wild boar. Even when they're doing it, even when they're engaging with an animal to bring it down, they're not really very high testosterone. What happens after they bring that animal down, though, is an absolutely beautiful thing, because they get this massive surge of testosterone, right, which helps them rebuild their muscles, and it gives them the energy to get home. But they also get this huge surge of oxytocin, which reminds them of their wives and their children at home who are waiting for them to lug that heavy carcass, lug the whole thing all the way ass back to the house and share it with their family. So it's like this beautiful confluence of hormones that are driving men to go out, seek that feeling of victory, bringing down an animal, that burst of testosterone, and then actually drag that carcass back home and split it evenly, because testosterone's been linked to fairness and bargaining, split it evenly with their hunting mate, share it with their family, provide for their family, enjoy those feelings of love and reunion. So, I mean, we don't really understand, like, this whole idea of testosterone poisoning has it so wrong. Testosterone does not actually you can't measure a guy's serum testosterone and predict whether he's going to be aggressive or not. It just doesn't work that way. So.
Well, fine. Thank you very much. I can remind you that we've got 350,000 Norwegian hunters every season, when there is for moose or for elk or for reindeer or whatever, So there's a lot of testosterone coming in afterwards.
Well, and the ladies have to attend to that.
You have a question here.
Someone once said that making things equal is like leveling the mountains and filling the valleys. And Murray Rothbard wrote an essay once entitled Egalitarianism as a Revolt Against Nature. And since this morning, there have been a few talks mentioning the term gender equality. And my question is, in what way is gender equality not about making the genders equal? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. We'll take a couple of more questions.
I just wanted to say, everybody, congratulations, brothers and sisters, on International Men's Day. Thank you, everybody in the panel and speakers, for giving a wonderful overview of gender disparity. That was a good update for me. I came here looking for inspiration today. The one thing from the stage that really inspired me was, is it Jesper? And that Danish model. Can't we just get that Danish model moving into Norwegian politics and society? I bloody well hope so. Otherwise, I met a very distinguished looking man. I think I'm looking at you over there in the blue shirt, who also inspired me here today. He talked about, if there's one thing that model sort of represented for me, it was a beautiful textbook example of how to change society from the inside. But then I talked to this guy who's an entrepreneur who started up a schooling project for young boys. And I think that's the other textbook example for me, is how to bring change from the outside of these political and social structures. Am I looking at the right guy there with the yeah, there he is, yeah. So I wondered if we could give him 1 minute to talk about his project, because it is wonderfully inspiring what they've done with private funding and a private initiative.
Well, thank you very much. We'll first take another question here.
Hello. This is for the two Danes. Let's see. On the Danish government resource for citizens, borger.dk, on the subject of discrimination, you find that right under the it's illegal to discriminate based on sex and race, etc., it says positive special treatment on race and sex is fine. What is the difference between positive special treatment and discrimination?
Well, that's a good question. Now we'll give a chance to this gentleman over here. You got a question, so can we have a quick answer? Yeah.
Well, I'm not prepared to actually to say something about this, but I've been working for with an idea to make something for boys in school. I've been working in the central authority for many years, but to change the school system is very, very difficult. So when I retired, I planned with a psychologist, and we got money, private money, to start a school for boys who are about to drop out of school. And I think we have worked for 2 years, and we are going up and up, because we can then do things that the public sector can't do themselves. We do a lot of things for the boys. We support them. We take the mobile telephone from them. We train them, and we give them much hard work and much love. And this is a kind of change strategy for the public sector, I think. So if you're interested, you can Google Guttas Campus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fine. Well, we've got 3 questions there. Prepared to answer, anyone? The Danes were challenged there. Jesper, varsågod.
I don't think there's any difference to answer you first. It is about gender discrimination. And I think the challenge we have right now in most Western world countries on gender equality is that the real driver in this is the population. That's what we see in Scandinavia. The population is much more in front than the law. And the problem is right now that for women organizations, is that everyone is so tired of gender equality and gender equality discussions, because it's every time about women. So I think the best thing for everyone is to change the debate about gender equality and really have this gender equality in gender equality. In our world, gender equality is about women, it's about men, it's about boys, it's about girls. And I think that's what society is missing right now. I don't think the women will succeed in promoting gender equality for women very much longer in the Nordic countries or in the Western world countries. Definitely there are countries that needs it, but I don't think they will succeed in that. And that's what we are seeing today, that everyone is so tired of this debate. So nothing will happen. The opposite will happen. That people will get more diverse, will talk more about men and women if we don't change the debate on gender equality. And I think that's one of the things that politicians, even women organizations, should learn. Even the UN on the world global goals, they talk about gender equality, but everything is about women, and a very small part of is about everyone else.
Yes, Simon, comment or supplement?
I detected a certain kind of irony when you read it, isn't it true? Yeah, and if you like stuff like that, you should follow the internal gender politics within the LGBT transformation plus IQ, blah 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 blah, and you will see in Denmark actually there's been a war between the T against the rest of the letters on the right, and we can laugh about that. Also, when you look at parties, you see internal combats as well. But for me, it's what like Jesper said. If we parcel up our life in groups like I am white, you are black, I am man, you're female, I'm from this part of the country, you're from another part, you'll parcel up in a way that we don't see each other as citizens, as human beings. And actually, that's one of my, also sometimes my problems with this men's movement, because it's a big parceling us up. We are males. So I really like the way that Jesper said that we have to always have these spaces that we are men, women, children, boys and girls, and include. Yeah.
Fine. Yes, Warren, you got a word?
Yeah, I'll work with the equality question and both parts of it, and the irony of discrimination, affirmative discrimination. It's a tough issue. First of all, the really big, broad issue is that no one should ever be talking about equality. They should be talking about equality of opportunity. The only thing that the law can provide is equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. And so then the next very tough and not politically easily able to be fit into a box category that has to be dealt with is there a role for affirmative action when there's a very small percentage of a gender in an area. And then I think you have to ask the question, what would be, so for example, when I talked about having special scholarships by a male teacher corps for men to enter elementary school teaching in the way that we have scholarships for women to enter into the science, technology, engineering, and math. And so there is an argument to be made for if women have been discouraged from getting into science, technology, engineering, and math for many years, is there a value to having an affirmative action plan for that to change? I think the answer is yes. But the answer of yes is a dangerous answer because it can easily go too far. Once you have the affirmative action, you have a bureaucracy to establish it. No bureaucracy has ever ended its own reign. And so there's a usefulness and a fear of that going too far. With the elementary teachers being hired as men, that I think there's a value to having elementary teachers be hired as men for two reasons. One is, it is not until there's about 50-50, a significant percentage of men in an elementary school situation where the male way of teaching can become valued. So many men are like, who teach in elementary school, they're men like me. I'm sort of a liberal, sensitive, caring, sweet type of guy. But there's as much of a need for men who are bricklayers and construction workers and more traditional men. So the whole dialogue on gender has been a dialogue where the feminists, which were liberal women, looked at the world from the way a liberal woman perceived themselves at disadvantage, and looked at the way a liberal woman would perceive a liberal man as being a dominating force. So, but no one looked at the way a liberal man would look at his own life and the challenges, and the way that liberal man would look at the beauty power of a woman and how powerless he feels before that. And then if we did that, we'd only covered liberals. We now also have to look at conservative women and how they experience themselves and conservative men how they experience themselves and conservative women. So every dialogue around gender needs to be an 8-part dialogue, and also include LGBTQ community people. But the understandings you'd get from that 8-part dialogue would incorporate a great deal of the understandings that you would get from the LGBTQ community. So we have opportunities here we've never had, and there are no clean answers. The cleanest answer is we have to have a real dialogue without political correctness, shutting people up from talking about the nuances that need to be a part of that dialogue.
And I can tell you that Mannsforum has written a letter to the Ministry of Education and asked for stimulation to stimulate men to seek the profession or education as teachers in school, so that you can get a higher balance. We've not got the positive answer, but the rumors say that they are willing to talk to us. But that can be a start. Okay, it's your turn.
Thank you for great presentations today. It's been a pleasure to listen to you. I am looking at the paradox of our times, in which the patriarchy, shall we say, in quotation marks, has succeeded to the point that the structures of our society, the infrastructure, the manufacturing, we're not really in a fight for our survival anymore. And it seems like precisely because we're not fighting for our survival, we have the opportunity to look at our emotions and start complaining about things. And as I see how this ingenious masculine drive to create new things keeps just relentlessly producing new technologies, one of the things that I'm looking at is the future of the workplace, and how it seems like robotics and artificial intelligence are about to phase out maybe half of jobs that would otherwise be occupied by men. And so I'm curious how any of you really look at the future of work for men and how we can address the coming challenges that are involved here. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Wait a minute. More questions?
I was ready.
They're all questioning is coming from here. I challenge this part of the floor.
Thank you for being here. I have an argument that politics has not really changed much since Socrates' time, being a childish game for self-gain and really trying to be right.
Poor Simon.
But so my question to any of you enlightened wisdom keepers here is, do you have any practical tips or examples, like the telephone, for how, which is great, the humor is great to break someone's self-importance, of course. So tools that you use in your trade, or tools that we can use to actually change the society, which doesn't play into the game of trying to be right, but actually to transcend and to grow as a whole society.
Yes, yes.
That was a big question. Whilst you think about it, we'll take another question. Did anyone take the turn?
Apparently not. Let's get on with answering the questions.
Yeah. You lost your chance.
All I gotta say is to that second question, I don't have any tips for not insisting on being right. The rest of you, go ahead. No. Half of my motivation for doing this is someone is wrong on the internet, and I have to set them straight. So.
Yeah, I do have a thought. I think the best way to deal with differences is to start out with the 3 L's. Listen first, listen first, listen first. So if you're up against someone that disagrees with our perspectives, hear them out. And then let them know what you heard them say. And then ask them if you've distorted anything. Ask them if you've missed anything. And when they've completed their process, say, would you give me the same courtesy? Would you like to say, I did this with a man the other day who was extremely angry at me, and he's now invited me to do a workshop with the police force because I listened first to him, and he was shocked. He was shocked, A, that I responded to him by email, and then that I acknowledged that part of what I said was incorrect, and it was like that sort of just turned him around. And so to this day, we are having dialogues, and very constructive dialogues. On the issue of the patriarch, your question was really... yes.
Can I...
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, because I think you're into something vital for us to be listened to. Because I think it's a major difference in how, when we try to talk about men's issues, how we can communicate that compared to how many feminists communicate about their issues, because we see that women are much more allowed to use emotions, and if we as men use emotions trying to debate, it's we will be, like I said in the start, ridiculed, and we are pathetic, and we are angry. So for us in the media, for the politicians to listen to us, I think it's very, very important to be constructive, polite, and
and to have facts.
And to have facts.
That's not the same as having right, but having facts.
Yeah.
Presenting facts in a good way, neutral, positive way. This is how we've been working now for quite some years, And I think we had some success with that. And I think without that, nobody would have listened to us, and all these people wouldn't have been here today.
If you see the development the last couple of years, for 3 or 4 years ago, if you had one article in media in 1 year, we were happy. 2 years ago, we had like 12 or 14 articles, and this year it will be like who knows after today. But we have passed 20.
I would like to say two things. One thing is, of course, facts, of course, dialogue. I'm all in for that. But you don't get, perhaps you can get in love in a dialogue, but you don't get in love with facts.
Yes.
And as you say, it's compassion, it's your heart that drives. This is when we get in love, when we build friendships, when we build relations, we build on other things than facts. And we have to realize also that, and I know that you all agree on that. And the answer to you is also coupled with the question you made, that the transformation of work, they have been talking about that for 50 years. Oh, the Chinese will take all over the practical work. So we have to change the schools. So we also have, everybody has to read Socrates at the first class because the Chinese will do the manual labor. It's a big fat lie. It's a big, big fat lie. There's lots of manual work in Norway, in Denmark, in Sweden, and the rest of the industrialized world, like in America. There's lots of manual work. It's not only coal miners. There are lots of people who transport goods, and they will not all be taken off by an automatic car driver in some times. And this question, compared with this question, also for me explains some of the problems we have, because the majority of men are working class men and working class women with lives very different from the life lived by people in this room. And we insist, like I insist, of course, also to have a compassionate dialogue on a relationship based on that. But if we're going to communicate to a group of men, which we can help also with our academic tools, we forget that they are living their lives in a totally changed, totally different society. And this is where humor comes in. This is where real love comes in. This is where we say, we love men. We love fathers. Fathers are fucking good. That all the thing you told about working with your kids, fighting them. We're good at that. And sometimes you can tell it like beautiful. I really love the way you tell it. But you can also show it by doing it. Have a culture in a school. Have a culture with your friends where you participate in that. So I have to, in my opinion, the class analysis, if one can use this word in 2019, is so horrible bad when we talk about the future of our work situation, and we talk about the majority of the population. They live total different lives when we have to communicate to them the elements of the men's movement.
But you ask about tips and tricks. To get change, you need political votes. That's how simple it is. To get the political votes, you need to get the population involved. To get the population involved, you need to get media. It's an information war everywhere today. And that's why we in Denmark, the one single thing, we've done all the mistakes for 40 years. The Father Association was founded in 1977. We're one of the oldest father organizations in the world. We've done every mistake. The one thing that has worked for us was that in 2011, we decided after reforms that no politicians has read our materials. We tested that. We made up, we say we need to do something different. So we decided on a media strategy that every week we sent a press release about statistic, a man's story to every parliament member, all national, local media, all leaders in government. And we have been doing that since 2011. Every week, every Wednesday, the politicians in parliament get one page from the Danish Father Association. If we have not done that, there would not have been created reforms today. It has created that media. After the first year, nothing happened. No one read it. After the first year, suddenly we see a change in media that they started doing television productions. They did stories like they have never done it before. And we have seen reforms based on that simple strategy. Just last week, we saw 20 of the best actors in Denmark launched a film last week, 2 weeks ago in Denmark. It's got 5 stars everywhere, about 4 of the situations from our desk about fathers that has been put into a movie now. We have
What's the name of the movie?
It's Collision. So it's based on this 20 of the best actors in Denmark who has done this movie. It's all about, it's the best-selling movie right now in Denmark. It's based on 4 father stories that we have provided them with, that they have put into one story. We have musicians, we have about 10 musicians now that has made music numbers that has gone on the hit list based on experience from fathers. So you need to be aware. To change, it's about political votes. To get political votes, it's about population. To get the population, it's about media and how to get that. So the one thing that we have done right is one press release every week since 2011. That will change everything.
Thank you. We'll start with that.
Very nice.
We'll start next week, you know. Anyone else who wants from the panel?
Do a comment on this gentleman.
You want to comment it?
What's that?
Are you commenting it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna comment.
And Jan, do you want the word? No. Okay.
I think your question was very perceptive and good, although I see it in 2 parts. One is the patriarchy part, and the other is the economy part. On the patriarchy part, I think it's really important for us to counter patriarchal theory. Women's Studies 101 goes like this. We've been dominated by a patriarchal system in which men have made the rules to benefit men at the expense of women. And so I think the counter that really rings true for people is actually the world has not been dominated by a patriarchy. It's been dominated by a need to survive. And as you said, that's why in all the developed countries, different questions are being allowed to be asked. Like the questions about divorce, the questions about single families, the questions about LGBTQ, the questions about men having purpose and no purpose. Those are all questions that you only can talk about when you have survival reasonably taken care of. And so what we did with when survival was the dominated force, both sexes in most cultures that are now developed cultures had roles. Neither sex had rights. My father, when I started talking about rights for women, which is, I was involved with the women's movement first, he just sort of like, yeah, rights for women is sort of good, but no one has rights. Our moms don't have rights, our dads didn't have rights. In the old days, when survival was at stake, no woman had the right to think about whether or not she wanted to have children or whether she wanted to raise them by herself. She knew she was female, therefore I am obligated to raise children. Men knew they were male, therefore they were obligated to raise money. And so both sexes had a straitjacket that they were being forced into because the society perceived that by being forced into A, marrying, B, marrying somebody from the other sex, not somebody from the same sex, would produce more children who would be protected by the mother and protected by the father in different ways. And no one cared about the freedom of the father to be a musician who didn't make any money or an art historian who didn't pick up garbage, or a woman who wanted to pursue a career. The world was not about rights. It was about responsibilities and obligations. And so for the first time, it can be more about rights and equality. So that I think that framing the patriarchy discussion as a survival discussion helps a lot of reasonable people see, oh yeah, my father, I never even asked the question, what was the glint in my father's eye? And the glint in your dad's eye was likely to be about things like fishing or playing music or being in a sports or telling stories or telling jokes or painting. They were not things that made money. The more fulfilling the occupation, the less it pays, the more people want to do it. If it's fulfilling, the fewer people can make a living doing it if it's fulfilling. So dads gave up fulfilling occupations to earn money that would support their families more effectively. Feminists turned that tendency and the willingness on the part of dads to sacrifice what they love to do what they had to do. It turned it on its head and said, oh, you're male dominated and you're a patriarchy because you earn more money. No, that male earning more money was the sacrifice I made so that you would have a better life than I had growing up. Okay. And then last, the economy part of that question. I can go. We can go on to something else.
No. Come on,
Sure.
come on.
Okay.
Come all the way from America.
I do think a little bit differently about this than Simon does. I do see our discussions with the Fed Reserve Chair says that looking into the future, that a great many of the jobs that will be taken in the future are jobs that will be coming from men. So there's 1.7 million U.S. truck drivers. It's now predicted that in the next 10 years that they will mostly lose their jobs because of self-driving trucks and robotics, the same type of thing. In the United States, we are not preparing. We had a whole era of preparing children to be in college. And we had an underdeveloped vocational system. And so in Japan, they have a very well-developed vocational system where they understand that about 30% of students, mostly males, are not inclined to do academic type of work, and so that they need to be trained vocationally. Among the ones, that 30%, 99.6% graduate with a job afterwards. And so there's so many businesses now. There are more businesses in the United States looking for workers than there are workers available, because we have not bridged that gap between the economy of the past and the economy of the future. There's two major crises America will face. One is the crisis of this type of lack of transition, which is basically a boy crisis, and the other is a crisis of cyber warfare. But those two crises are really dominant, and we must figure out a way that men who were not academic, they made their living from muscle. The future is not about muscle. The future is about microchip. The future is not about passes about muscle. The future is about mental. And we have to make that transition effective all over the world.
Well, I want to add one thing to that because, like I have a 17-year-old boy and a 25-year-old boy, a 25-year-old man, I guess. We have neglected vocational tracks in Canada as well. One of the things that really bothered me, because I graduated high school in 1987, but it was never presented to me. It was expected, even as a girl being raised in the 1980s in the patriarchal, horrific hellscape that was patriarchy Canada. It was expected that I would matriculate and take a profession, right? It was what my parents expected. It was what my teachers expected. It was what my principal and school guidance counselor expected. It was never put in front of me that I could learn how to silk screen shirts or these were vocational tracks that were available in my school, but they were never put in front of me as an option by any adults in a position of trust that would be advising me. And the reason why is because those were considered the jobs for dummies. And, my dad, he could have been an engineer. He chose to be a heavy-duty mechanic. He liked to work with his hands. He's a brilliant man. But he liked to work with his hands, so that's what he did. He wanted something better for me than working with my hands. And I ended up just trying university and saying, screw this and screw you twice in the first 6 months of school, because I hated it. I hated school. I hated academics. I hated all of that stuff. If somebody had told me I could be a mechanic like my dad, that, I could get into the track, I could go into an apprenticeship immediately after high school, I might have done it. And we need to get rid of that stigma. Mike Rowe speaks about this, the guy from Dirty Jobs show called Dirty Jobs in the United States, speaks about this an awful lot, that, you know, you don't have to follow your bliss into a career. You can have your bliss at home, right? And you can have a stable, steady job. And right now, yes, robotics, yes, microchips, but right now, for my boy, you know, what do I tell him when he's like, I'm not sure he's going to graduate this year or in spring? What do I do? What do I do for a living? What should I do? I'm like, well, if someone needs their toilet fixed, they can't outsource it to Bangalore. So I'd suggest something like that, right? They're not going to be able to come up with a robot that's going to be able to just come into somebody's house, take out an old toilet and put in a new toilet. They're not going to be able to get robots who are that good for at least another, well, you'll probably be almost retired by then. So, you know, like that's another thing, right? We have this sense that these things are changing super, super, super fast, but there's still plenty of vocational work that are going to require somebody operating the welding torch, somebody, you know, screwing the little thingies that cover the bolts at the base of your toilet and popping them on. Robots aren't going to be able to do it all. So, I mean, there's still plenty of stuff, options for young men. So,
I agree.
Thank you very much, Karen. Now, time is running out, and I thought we'd like to give the panel 1 minute each to give a sort of final go-ahead or a final advice to us, or just what you have in heart to share with us. Shall we start with you? Skal vi begynne med deg, Jan?
Yeah. Thank you. I think all the panel have had a lot of interesting answers and speeches today. I am myself especially interested in what you said about practical jobs for the young people, what Warren said about the model in Japan. I'd like to study that more. And what you said, Karen, about your young sons or daughters. I have myself a son who he is in Norwegian we say elektriker. And he's working with the electric things in the houses and buildings. And I think these practical jobs will change, but there will be a lot of them. And the problem is that they have to do so much theoretical work to get through also that education today. So we have to have another model. And this system is destroying many of our young, fine kids. Yes. They can do much better than today when they just fall out of everything and it's doing many things that goes the wrong way. So I'm looking for the practical solutions, practical thing we can do for our young and elder men, and I will keep on working with what I mentioned a little about in my short speech about men's health, about especially the different forms of cancer that men are victim of, and it's very a deep problem that we can't work with these forms of cancer like we do with these forms who women are overrepresented or only women are have problem with. So I think we should try to get the focus in the man's in the work for the man's position in society. More and more work with more and more concrete questions so that they can engage, understand what we are talking about. Because if there's too much theoretical discussions, my people in Groruddalen will not be, and if there's too much discussions in English and so on, they will not follow us. So we have to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I agree on the need for vocational training to be put into schools, not only because there is jobs that these people has to take and work in, but also because out of the hands the new ideas spring. In Denmark, it's not, I don't know what it is here, but in Denmark, the majority of patents, are they made from scientists at the university, or are they made with people with a background in vocational training? The latter. It's people with vocational training who drives the economy concerned when it comes to patents. And it's also the majority of the population who work within these working areas. And I agree, of course, that things will change, but come on, the microchip was invented 40 years ago. Come on. The climate area, the ecological transformation we have to do for our society will entail some kind of also new manual labor where lots of these men can work. So I'm hoping that we will see that, but nobody knows. But I agree with the panel that vocational training is important in schools because of several reasons. And then we shall fight our struggle about this agenda with our hearts. We shall tell women, politicians, and everybody how cool, wonderful, sexy, nice, compassionate men and boys are. And this is the grand story. And of course, we should also know that when we do that, there is problems, and we have to talk about them also. But if we're going to connect to people out of an academic scene, out of a media area, we have to tell the stories that people know that it's true. That more or less every day the story about men and women is they come along, they love each other. The story of our evolution is that we actually find each other, and this is the story we have to tell.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, what gives me, I guess, good feelings, because this whole debate can bum you out quite frequently. But, it really is that what I was talking about when you said I made you cry, and the gentleman back there said I made him cry in London, is that men and women are fellow travelers, right? We are not meant to be genders, nations at war. We're meant to be, cooperative. We're meant to be, pieces that fit together, maybe not perfectly, but well enough to get the job of, daily life and just having a decent future to get that done. And I think that's probably, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there, in terms of we really do need to come together. We really do need, as men's advocates for men and boys, to not exclude women and girls, to look at how where we're going also negatively impacts women and girls. When 60% of university students are women, and all of a sudden you see a plethora of articles in newspapers, national newspapers in the United States, from women in their 30s complaining they can't find a man as educated as they are. Well, what do you think was going to happen? So, these are complex problems, and they have knock-on effects for everybody in society, including women, including girls, including everyone. So I think I think keeping that as the first focus is, and always having that in mind, is probably going to serve all of us very, very well. So
I agree.
Okay, I think I have to say that it's all about political votes. And to get those politicians involved, to get the votes, we need people like every one of us to go out there and tell the stories. We need men and we need women to collaborate, tell the stories, and we need artists to go out there and make films, make art, make everything, so that we can get society involved and say, we really have a problem here. Children need their fathers and mothers. They need love and should have love and respect. And if that's the purpose, then there's a lot of stories that need to be told, and the men need to get into action and tell the stories anyway, for politicians, for media, in the newspapers, talking to friends and things like that. That's how things are going to change, and how the political environment is going to listen, and then the change will happen.
I obviously agree about the importance of politics and the importance of boys' issues. However, if I were to look more deeply, I would say also that boys' issues often happen without dads. Dads' issues often happen when there's divorces. Divorces happen when there's not good communication. The key to bad communication versus good communication is that human beings have an Achilles heel. Our Achilles heel is our inability to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive. That's biologically natural to be defensive, because historically you might be in a kinship network or a tribe and you heard criticism from another tribe or kinship network. If you didn't get up your defenses, you wouldn't survive. If you didn't kill them before they killed you, you wouldn't survive. That was functional for survival. It is dysfunctional for love. Love needs your partner to be heard. So one of the reasons I do couples communication courses all around the country is I've finally been able to create a way to have people create a conflict-free zone for 166 hours a week, and then for 2 hours a week, meditate into an altered state where your partner has time to be able to share what his or her concern is with you. And you are able to hear them in a way that makes you understand that as you provide a safe environment for your partner's feelings and criticisms and concerns, your partner will feel safer with you, feel more loved by you, and therefore more love for you. And that's just the beginning of a meditation that allows you to feel safe when we're being criticized. That's an alteration of a biological evolution that's happened for millions of years. You can't do it for very long, but you have to know how to do it in order to make it a safe environment. Then you don't have to legislate for a lack of for divorces not being allowed, because you'll have more love, and when you have more love, you don't need to divorce. And once you're able to do that, then you model to your children how to communicate and how to and then lead to fewer divorces for them. So one of the things that I would add to the importance of politics is the importance of knowing how to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive.
This is a difficult one, but I'm still, my mindset is still with the boys. And I think, as a matter of fact, the boys are, in a sense, the vulnerable gender at the time. They're vulnerable because they lose contact with fathers. They're vulnerable because the school system has changed, so that they're starting in school even younger and younger and younger. And their biology doesn't follow this. I mean, their language abilities are created 18 months later than girls, and especially their right brain is very vulnerable to frustration and to tolerate sitting still and to manage all the feelings that comes up with frustration in schools. And Alan Shore says that it's about 20 months later developed in boys than in girls. So they are very much exposed because of this initiative to start schooling at 6 or actually at 5.5. And this also creates a problem with all the ADHD medication that stops boys from playing, and playing is a huge big part of what teaches them about life. And when they get totally flat medicated, they mostly get depressed. And so I think that we've talked a lot about fathers today, but I'd also like to say something about grown-up males. Grown-up males are not very good at being solidaric with showing solidarity with boys, and boys need you. I mean, they need older men as mentors. They need guys like you, Jan, who are really representing them and sort of fighting for them, and they need to feel that somebody is for them, and we as elder men need to teach them not to listen to this degradation, this way of women putting themselves as moral leaders of the world, and men and boys as sort of not unworthy persons in the world. This is terribly destructive for the boys' self-esteem. And so we really need to sort of stand up for the boys, and especially we need to stand up for the boys with no fathers, with lack of social backing and lack of resources. And there's a lot of them also in Norway. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I think everybody here has been talking about we should involve ourselves, and I think that is maybe one of the reasons why, for example, Men's Day don't get enough focus, and why boys and men issues don't get focus, because maybe we men, we are from all times, we are hunters, we go alone, we don't group together, we don't involve ourselves in making changes. And now I've been working as in sales in my youth. So now I'm addressing the audience for us, working in Men's Forum to make change. One of the most important factors to be able to make change is the number of members we have. So all you people in the audience, remember that when you leave here today.
We need you.
Thank you.
And what should everyone who's present here today do when they come home?
They should. They don't need to go home. There are some new technology here, Guttorm.
Yeah.
You can do it on your mobile phone.
Okay.
Vips
But what
is
should
called.
they do? What's the address?
Yeah, you can. The easiest way to be a member is to pick up your mobile phone, and if you have the Vips app, most of you do, I think, and just to go on the choice buy and seek up Man's Forum and just
.no.
Yeah, it's easy.
So you're now telling everybody to do that, are you?
I don't force anybody.
No.
That would be aggressive.
Well, I do. I suggest you do, you know. Now, let's give some gifts to the panel. And, of course, our far traveling persons will get the first.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if you wonder what they get, is a typical Norwegian tourist gift. It's ostehøvel. And they have to buy the cheese themselves.
Cheese.
That's great.
Simon?
Thank you.
Oh, that's quite nice, actually.
That's the traditional.
Jesper? These are all very interesting books. So I hope you'll read them. And if not, if you've read them already, give them on, you know. And Dag, he won't get the book. He's written a book. He'll get a bottle.
Yay!
So thank you, everybody. And now it's a break, but remember, on the at the back here, there are still books, and we got a new lorry with books from Warren Farrell, you know. So, and he's still here, so he can sign the book if you like. They're just around the corner. Dag is still here, he can sign books.
Before I sign the books, I just want to share that Gudtorn and Lars have not spoken, but they have done so much to make this happen. Let's just acknowledge their work and their devotion to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, as a reward, that's very nice of you. As a reward, there's coffee here, there's water, there's tea, and there's beer in the bar. But not free.